I know there's not a parent in America who doesn't feel the same overwhelming grief that I do. The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own. Among the fallen were also teachers, men and women who devoted their lives to helping our children fulfill their dreams.
Then President Barack Obama, wiping a single tear from his eye, joining in the nation's grief over the murder of 20 children and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. President Obama calls December 14th, 2012, the darkest day of his presidency. The weeks and months following the massacre were also a challenge. For months, the Obama administration worked to pass gun reform, a bipartisan bill to expand federal background checks, something that has long had overwhelming bipartisan support among the American public, only to see that bill die on the Senate floor. President Obama's tears were replaced with animosity over the Senate's failure to act on a life-or-death piece of legislation.
Families that know unspeakable grief summon the courage to petition their elected leaders. Not just to honor the memory of their children, but to protect the lives of all of our children. A few minutes ago, a minority in the United States Senate decided it wasn't worth it. They blocked common sense gun reforms, even while these families looked on from the Senate gallery.
Now, you probably noticed the future president of the United States standing behind Obama. At the time, then Vice President Joe Biden was tapped to lead the administration's effort to pass that very bill. His efforts were defeated. 10 years later, though, President Joe Biden leads the same nation with the same gun problem. This year, another mass shooting at an elementary school reopened the wounds that were still healing from Sandy Hook. 19 children and 2 teachers died in their classrooms at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been at least 611 mass shootings in the U.S. this year alone, making 2022 the second worst year for gun violence since 2013. The archive defines a mass shooting as 4 or more victims shot, either injured or killed, in a single shooting event. It's easy to feel like nothing has changed or like things have gotten worse. But the truth is better than that. This year, Congress passed its first federal gun safety law in decades. The legislation includes incentives for states to pass so-called red flag laws and tightens background checks. The bill provides a narrow set of gun safety measures, but it's still the most significant step towards strengthening federal gun laws in 30 years. But what's arguably more impressive, it's what's going on the state level. A new report by the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, a group led by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived a shooting herself in 2011, found that 525 significant gun safety laws have been adopted on the state level in the decade since Sandy Hook. According to the report, nearly every single state in the nation has passed at least one significant gun safety law in the last 10 years. 21 states passed community violence intervention, which includes laws that direct funding to community-centered programs that build relationships between residents, social services, and law enforcement. 37 states took up domestic violence prohibitions. 20 states embraced red flag protection measures, which allow authorities to temporarily remove weapons from people who may be a threat to themselves or to others until a judge adjudicates the issue. 29 states toughened background checks. 18 states approved laws that make it more difficult for children and young adults to access firearms. The Giffords report also found that gun deaths rose 46% in the 5 states with the weakest gun laws and rose 7% in the 7 states with the strongest gun laws. So you see, it has been quite the decade for America's gun policy. When Joe Biden was tasked with passing the federal gun legislation in 2012, an undertaking he accomplished 10 years later, he took on another role, one equally as important as passing legislation. Then Vice President Biden held dozens of calls with the families of the Sandy Hook victims. Mark Barden, whose son Daniel was killed at Sandy Hook Elementary, tells Politico that to this day he still remembers the advice that Joe Biden gave him at the time, which was, quote, keep a notebook on his bedside table, and each night grab a pen and rate the day on a scale of 1 to 10. Barden recalls Biden telling him, quote, you're going to have a lot of ones for a long time, but you might get a 2. Then maybe you'll get a 3, and you'll have more ones, and then maybe you'll get a 4, said Biden, recalling one of the many long talks, said Barden, recalling one of the many long talks he had with Joe Biden at the time, who he calls a friend. He said, you won't believe me now, but there will come a day when you'll think about Daniel and a smile will come to your face before a tear comes to your eye.